2026's Michael presents itself as the definitive cinematic telling of Michael Jackson's life and career from 1966 to the film's end in 1988. A sweeping portrait of the moments that shaped his rise, his struggles, and his transformation into the world's biggest superstar. But how much of what the film shows actually happened the way it's portrayed? Did Michael truly sever ties with his father in one dramatic fax? Was it really one phone call that forced MTV to play Billie Jean? And did Michael's final break from his brothers happen exactly as the film depicts? Because while Michael draws heavily from real events, many of its most pivotal scenes are far less accurate than fans may have hoped, some even being outright reshaped for dramatic effect. So in this video, we're breaking down the film's biggest moments and separating Hollywood myth from that historical reality. 1. In the movie Michael, one of the key moments in Michael Jackson's early career is portrayed while the Jackson 5 is performing at a talent show at Chicago's Regal Theater. In the scene, Motown executive Suzanne DePass approaches their father, Joe Jackson, hands him her card, and invites the group to audition for Motown. Narratively, it provides a clean and simple explanation for how the group were discovered. But the reality was much more complicated. The Jackson 5 were officially signed by Motown in July 1968 after auditioning for executives in Detroit, performing songs including James Brown's I Got the Feelin'. Yet the story of who actually discovered them has long been contested, with several figures playing a role in bringing the group to Motown's attention. The most publicly credited was Diana Ross. Motown famously pushed the narrative that Ross had discovered the Jackson 5 herself, despite that not being technically true. From a branding perspective, the strategy was obvious. Attaching the label's biggest female star to its newest act gave the group immediate prestige. It wasn't subtle. Their debut album was even titled Diana Ross Presents the Jackson 5. It was a coronation by association, an open endorsement from one of Motown's most established names before the group had even entered the public eye. By the time the Jackson 5 exploded with I Want You Back, the foundation had already been laid. Behind the branding, however, others appear to have played a far more substantive role. According to several accounts, Gladys Knight was among the first Motown figures to take notice of the group after seeing them perform at a talent show, and reportedly promised to help get them in front of Berry Gordy. However, the man most widely credited with actually making that happen was Bobby Taylor of Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers. During a July 1968 engagement at Chicago's Regal Theater, as portrayed in the film, Taylor had the Jackson 5, then a little-known family act from Indiana, open for his group. Impressed by what he saw, Taylor personally brought the brothers to Detroit and arranged an audition with Suzanne DePass at Motown. DePass and eventually Berry Gordy were highly impressed. The group was signed soon after.
Marshall asked me to go and look at this kid that was on stage at the time I walked in. And I went up there and that was this little bitty guy about like that. Well, how'd you like to go to Motown? He said, you don't need it. What do you mean? He said, well, you know, Gladys Knight said she was going to do that. And I said, she did. I said, where did she see you? She said, well, we went on the David Frost show. And David Frost, you know, is the guy from England. And we went on the show and we met Gladys Knight on that show. And she said, you boys are good. I'm going to get you to Motown, he said. And we ain't never heard from her again. I said, okay, tell you what. You want to go with Motown? I said, I'll take you there and I'll get you signed. Started.
So while Michael condenses the Jackson 5's discovery into a single dramatic moment for the sake of narrative clarity, the truth is that their road to Motown was shaped by multiple people championing them behind the scenes before the label ultimately repackaged that story into a more marketable myth. 2. Another key moment that Michael builds toward is Michael Jackson finally taking the plunge and firing his father, Joe Jackson, with the help of his entertainment lawyer, John Branca, famously via fax. In the film, it is presented as a decisive and symbolic break, a singular moment in which a young Michael finally severs his father's control over his career and steps fully into independence. But once again, the reality was far more complicated. While Michael did ultimately remove Joe from his business affairs, the process was neither sudden nor clean. When it came to his father, Michael was long accustomed to conducting damage control in the wake of Joe Jackson's aggressive mismanagement. Since the Motown days, Joe Jackson received a percentage of every dollar the group had earned and had held at least the titular post as the band's manager, first in partnership with Richard Aarons, then with Ron Weisner and Freddie DeMann. Joe was always in the room, a figure whose presence could not be escaped, even when outside managers were technically in charge. But by the late 1970s, Michael had begun to evolve beyond the family structure. His first adult solo album, Off the Wall, was produced by Quincy Jones, a creative partnership Joe neither arranged nor approved. It marked the beginning of Michael's independence. When Off the Wall's success turned Michael into a solo superstar, Joe panicked, fearing he was being squeezed out. By 1983, Joe's frustration had boiled over. With the Jacksons' management contracts with Weisner and DeMann expiring, Joe declared to Billboard magazine, quote, "As far as I'm concerned, it's over. They don't have a contract, and my boys are not re-signing." The situation turned ugly when Joe referred to the two managers as white help. Freddie DeMann shot back that Joe, quote, "doesn't enjoy a good relationship with anyone whose skin is not black." It took Michael himself to step in and contain the damage this conflict could cause his career. He told Billboard, quote, "I don't know what would make him say something like that. To hear him talk like that turns my stomach. I happen to be colorblind. I don't hire color. I hire competence. Racism is not my motto." That public repudiation of his father's words was, in its own way, an act of emancipation. For perhaps the first time, Michael defied Joe not only professionally, but morally. When Michael later fired Weisner and DeMann, Joe believed he could step back in. But he couldn't have been more mistaken. Michael had already retained John Branca as his lawyer, and Marshall Gelfand as his business manager, two of the most respected figures in entertainment law. Joe's influence was crumbling, but he wasn't ready to let go. When the Jacksons began discussing a reunion tour, Joe reinserted himself and brought King into the fold because he saw in him a kindred spirit. Jermaine Jackson later recounted, quote, "King was picked to oversee the tour because he was the only one who wanted to get my father involved." In March 1984, while the Victory Tour was still in its early stages, Michael made a pivotal decision. He hired Frank DeLeo as his personal manager to stem the influence King and his father had on the tour and help protect his career. This hire effectively made Don King's role redundant, pushing him to the sidelines while also diminishing his father's influence over the tour. And once the tour concluded at the end of 1984, Michael Jackson would never again work with his father in any professional capacity, whether through management, business dealings, or any formal involvement in his career. 3. Another pivotal moment portrayed in Michael is the scene in which Michael Jackson and his lawyer, John Branca, meet with Walter Yetnikoff, head of CBS Records, and urge him to pressure MTV into airing Michael's music videos. In the film, Yetnikoff initially resists, before dramatically doubling down, threatening MTV's executives that he will pull all CBS artists from the network unless they add Billie Jean to their rotation. It makes for a compelling scene, but the reality of how Michael Jackson broke racial barriers in music television and became one of MTV's defining stars of the 1980s was far more nuanced than the film suggests. The Billie Jean video is often credited with breaking color barriers on MTV, a channel that debuted on August 1st, 1981, and up until that point exclusively pushed white artists with a more rock-orientated output. This didn't go unnoticed, as MTV was accused of racism during this era, most notably by Rick James, whose Super Freak video was rejected by the network.
You know, this isn't the Wizard of Oz. I mean, there are black people here, and we make music, and we spend thousands, $100,000 on videos. And we're not doing this for the sake of because we enjoy doing it. We're doing it because it's part of the art.
Quote, Maybe MTV gets slagged because of what is construed as its overt racism, journalist Michael Shore wrote in The Village Voice in 1982. Quote, "It goes for the biggest sellers to the biggest audience, which means white youth music, as in corporate rock and heavy metal." Many behind the scenes at MTV argued that while viewers in New York or other cosmopolitan centers wouldn't be fazed by seeing black artists as part of their programming, they also needed to accommodate Middle America and less open-minded territories. Even though MTV had a growing viewership, record companies wouldn't budget for videos by their black artists since they didn't think they would play them. So the network could make the argument that they simply didn't have any good videos by black artists. However, as an avid fan of filmmaking, Michael Jackson knew that argument wouldn't fly as soon as he presented them with the Billie Jean video, which was startlingly innovative and took the new art form to greater heights. Despite its production value and Jackson's star quality, MTV initially refused to air Billie Jean, promising to instead broadcast Michael's next video, Beat It, because it was more fitting to their rock format.
We are looking for a certain sound and a certain point of view.
Bob Pittman is the 29-year-old whiz kid who created MTV after a successful career as a radio station program director. He sees little difference between radio and cable.
We are not all things to all people. We are cable television, and what cable television does best is specialize. One thing per channel, so you know exactly what you're getting when you turn on the channel.
Enraged by their refusal, Walter Yetnikoff, the president of Jackson's record company CBS Records, threatened to expose MTV's stance as racial discrimination. Quote, "I said to MTV, I'm pulling everything we have off the air, all our product. I'm not going to give you any more videos, and I'm going to go public and tell them about the fact you don't want to play music by a black guy." MTV quickly relented and premiered the Billie Jean music video on March 10, 1983. The single was already topping the charts, but in part because of the video's heavy rotation on MTV, Billie Jean soon broke records by remaining #1 for a total of 7 weeks. In terms of the film's timeline, Michael portrays the battle to get Michael Jackson onto MTV as the final hurdle of the Thriller era, framing it as though Michael had already created all of the album's iconic visuals, including Billie Jean, Beat It, and Thriller, before then fighting to have them aired. But in reality, that chronology is inaccurate. Michael was already in heavy rotation on MTV for months before the Thriller short film was ever produced, with videos such as Billie Jean and Beat It helping establish him as one of the network's fastest rising stars well before Thriller entered production. In fact, the Thriller short film likely would never have been made in the form audiences know today without MTV's direct involvement. From the record label's perspective, they had little interest in making another video, believing that the album had already peaked. MTV, who benefited greatly from Jackson's earlier visual output, had a policy of not financing music videos, instead expecting record companies to pay for them in order to promote their artists, with Epic only contributing $100,000. Landis's producer George Folsey Jr. suggested a making of documentary that, combined with the full-length video, would produce an hour-long film that could be sold to television to help finance its production. When the idea was proposed to networks, Showtime agreed to pay for half its budget, and MTV confirmed they would pay the rest, justifying their expenditure as financing a motion picture and not just a music video. 4. A dramatic moment in Michael is the depiction of Michael Jackson's serious accident on the set of a Pepsi commercial, where a pyrotechnic effect went wrong, his hair caught fire, and he suffered severe burns. The scene itself does not quite capture the full drama of the event, and while the film suggests Michael's life was at risk in that moment, the reality of what happened that day and what followed was arguably even more consequential than the film portrays. On January 27, 1984, while filming at Los Angeles Shrine Auditorium before an audience of 3,000 screaming fans, disaster struck. After hours of shooting, director Bob Giraldi requested one last take. Jackson had already performed the same sequence 5 times, descending a short staircase as fireworks burst around him. But Giraldi wanted the timing tighter. According to Jackson's bodyguard Miko Brando, the director instructed him to, quote, "stay alongside the fireworks until after the blast." When the pyrotechnics went off, There was a sudden, blinding explosion, much larger than in previous takes. At first, Michael continued dancing, unaware that sparks had caught in his hair. He completed his spin at the bottom of the stairs before realizing something was wrong. Witnesses recalled him shouting, "Tito! Tito!" before crew members rushed forward. Makeup artist Karen Fay later said, quote, "All his hair was gone, and there was smoke coming out of his head. I never saw anything like that in my life." Chaos erupted in the auditorium. Some fans screamed, "Michael Jackson's been shot." Michael was rushed from the stage and taken by ambulance to Brotman Memorial Hospital in Culver City. Even in distress, his showman instincts were intact. Quote, "Leave the glove on," he told an attendant. "The media is here."
Jackson was rushed to the hospital last night after a bizarre accident set his hair on fire while he was filming a television commercial.
The scene was wild as hundreds of fans tried to see Michael Jackson as he was carried into a Los Angeles area hospital.
It seemed like he didn't know what was happening, like something was in his hair, and he started shaking it, and it was all blue and white.
Girls started crying, and all the lights went off immediately. We thought it was part of the act that was going on.
Doctors found second and third-degree burns across a palm-sized area of his scalp. His plastic surgeon, Dr. Stephen Hofflin, told reporters, quote, "He's in discomfort and may suffer some permanent hair loss." Outside the hospital, hundreds of fans gathered, while inside, the switchboard fielded more than 200 calls per minute. Although what the public saw were lighthearted photos of Michael smiling with staff the next day, the reality was far more serious. He reportedly stayed awake until 1 a.m. in pain before finally falling asleep. Privately, he was furious. He believed the accident was the result of negligence on set. Quote, "The reason for the fire was stupidity, pure and simple. These bombs were only 2 feet away from either side of my head," he later recounted. Jackson threatened to sue, but ultimately accepted a $1.5 million settlement instead. Pepsi's vice president, Alan Potish, proclaimed, "We wish it had never happened." After the accident, Michael Jackson underwent multiple surgeries in an effort to treat the areas of his scalp that had been scarred by the burns. One procedure took place shortly before the Victory Tour, as doctors attempted to repair the damaged tissue ahead of the physically demanding run of shows. Then, in December, immediately after the tour concluded, Michael underwent another operation in which surgeons removed sections of scar tissue and stitched the surrounding healthy scalp back together in an attempt to improve the healing and appearance of the affected area. Unfortunately, the procedures were not fully successful. Over the years, Michael would undergo multiple additional scalp surgeries to manage the long-term effects of the injury sustained that day. And for some observers, the repeated surgeries, chronic pain, and reliance on medication that followed marked the beginning of a pattern whose ramifications would extend for decades, some even tracing that chain of events all the way to the circumstances surrounding his death nearly 25 years later. 5. Michael's dramatic climax as a film comes during the final show of the Victory Tour, when he announces that he is leaving his brothers and effectively brings the Jacksons' touring career to an end. On screen, it plays as a satisfying moment of liberation, Michael finally claiming independence from his brothers, from the group, and from the long shadow of Joe Jackson's control over his life and career. But did the event really happen as it is portrayed? On December 9th, 1984, in the rain, at the end of the final Dodger Stadium show, Michael made a surprise announcement. He told the crowd he was leaving the group and that this would be the last time the Jacksons would ever perform together.
Listen up. I'd like to say this is our last and final tour. And I think this is our farewell tour. Y'all been wonderful. It's been a long 20 years, and we love you all.
Though Michael had maintained that the Victory Tour would be his last with his brothers, they were reportedly stunned to hear it confirmed on stage in front of thousands. The announcement marked the end of their historic 20-year run as a group. After dropping that bombshell, the Jacksons were joined by family and friends on stage in celebration, a forced performance of a triumphant end to a historic but torturous musical endeavor. It was a brutal but fitting conclusion, a tour born from family obligation and business scheming, ending with Michael publicly reclaiming his independence and asserting control over his own life and career once again. However, the tour's toll on Michael's relationship with his family proved lasting. Quote, "It was the worst experience Michael ever had with his brothers. One insider later recalled, some were jealous. There was denial. The whole gamut of human emotions." At a time when Michael's astronomical fame had already begun to strain family bonds, the trauma of the tour created a wound that never truly healed. Quote, "The bitterness between him and his brothers had a deep and lasting effect," another associate said. Quote, "It alienated him from them for most of his later life and effectively ended the Jacksons as a performing group." The Victory Tour didn't just end the trailblazing legacy of the Jackson 5 and the Jacksons. It slammed the door shut. The Detail is dedicated to uncovering the real stories behind Michael Jackson's life and career. If you enjoy these deep dives, consider subscribing